Hi, Erica. Thank
Hello.
you so much for being here for our virtual studio visit.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to actually be in your studio today.
Yes, an in-person studio visit finally.
Yes, socially distanced still.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here, and I just want to get to know a little bit more about your work and bring it to our audience and see what's going on in your world.
So I can give you the 411 of my studio practice. So essentially it's exciting for me to take the mundane and transform it into something theatrical, creating a distance from the banal. Essentially, when I'm working, I try to balance vague narratives and unsettling ambiguity. And I consider these paintings like a still moment that lingers, like a little snippet of time where there's a potential of something happening, but I'm not giving you the whole story. And light and color is really important in my work. So in that, I'm trying to create an ambient, atmospheric setting that can provoke feelings of anxiety, apprehension, tension, and really capture the feelings of aloneness. And then lately, I've been exploring safety and threat in domestic spaces.
Okay. There's so many things that I want to ask you from that whole entire statement, but even just stopping at the last point with the new work that you're exploring, domesticity and violence, and noticing that you don't have any figures in your work, and how might that translate into what you're creating?
So when I first started painting, I felt like it was a necessity to insert figures within the painting, but then it becomes about their story. So I wanted to try to create something that was ambiguous, but still spoke to on a universal level. So using like the iconography that people recognize and that they have their own contextual associations with what is being seen. For example, the playground, everybody recognizes that, but it's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So everybody can relate to that. And as far as the human figure being absent, I strongly believe that there's presence in absence. And then again, that speaks on a more universal level to the audience.
Very interesting. So within your work and the tonality, the atmosphere of it, you very much get those tensions. And I'm looking at the trike up above and just note all of the previous artists that you must be looking at. William Eggleston is the first one that comes to mind. We had an exhibition of his photography, also the Banal and America. And are there any other artists?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I'd like to first start with film. I am a big admirer of David Lynch's work. The way that he's able to subvert the banal into something that's kind of otherworldly, but still grounds itself in the reality. And I really admire that he's able to like dissect the underbelly of Americana. Stanley Kubrick also comes to mind, the way that he's able to create these moments that are still ambient scenes that really build anxiety. And I was thinking to myself, how do I emulate the cinematic devices into my own work, considering it's one still image? So I came across Gregory Crewdson's photography, and basically he choreographs these huge settings, almost like a stage, like a film set, and he like organizes, and everything is intentional, and he places the figures, and everything has to be perfect. And I was thinking, that's great that he's able to create a story within one still image, but that's still talking about a specific place or a specific person's story. And then that's when I started thinking about, how do I create my own contextual associations with what is important to me, or how can I talk about something else? So for example, when you point out the little tricycle, I see these as more than just props to paint or like a still life. I almost see them as characters in themselves, kind of like a placeholder to talk about something else. So
Very much like you brought up the absence and presence idea. So there's still absolutely the idea of people in these spaces and interacting in these spaces. So within your practice, you also go out and take photographs for the inspiration for your studio work. How do you, where do you go? And,
So usually on my daily commute, I'm gonna be like, oh, I love this light. I love that the way this tree is being illuminated. But when I'm going through all my references, it's more like a process in itself. It's like I need to find a strong formal composition that has the potential of being distorted and manipulated. At the same time, looking for things that are charged with human presence and that has the potential of just creating it and transforming it into something else. So that's usually where I go with that. And then like, there's a variety of different avenues that I'll go to when I choose my reference photography. Sometimes I'll do like one shot of a reference. For example, again, this one, and then that's good enough for me. But sometimes I'll have to take, like, I love this van, I love this light, I like this tree, and I'll combine it and create my own stuff within Photoshop. And that's basically like a 2-3 hour process just on the computer, like changing light, adding or subtracting things, and it's all intentional. I really I think that there's a quote by Enrique Martinez Celaya that states that the greatness of an artwork is more of what it holds back than what it shows. So I really keep that in mind with orchestrating and dissecting my imagery with my paintings.
I really like that idea of reservation and being able to, like, of course here you're inviting in a ton of different stories, a ton of different interpretations. But for you, is there a specific idea or theory that you're trying to get across? How are you doing these transformations? What within the environment are you specifically like really modifying?
So like I said, light and color is so important. And I learned through my practice that light is incredibly valuable. So where you place it really has an indicator of what story you're trying to tell. If you have too much light going on, it loses its gravity. Where if you have a select or intentional placement, it can really change the outcome. Especially when I'm injecting, for example, light in houses shining through, like the color really changes your interpretation of what's going on inside that you can't see. So that's something that I consider when I approach or like manipulate things. So it's really about combining artificial light with natural elements and see what I can create.
Do you have any narratives that go with the work, or do you leave it open?
I want to leave it open because once I make the painting, to me, like, it's everybody's painting. I'm not trying to tell my story, but I still inject my own sort of, motifs or the themes that I stated earlier about, like, aloneness and stillness. And I try to keep those things in mind, but again, like, I keep it ambiguous, and I want everybody to be able to read it and enjoy it. One of the things, I was doing an interview with Orlando Voyager a couple weeks ago, and one of the questions was, what are you most proud of? And what I'm most proud of is when somebody will come to me after they're done looking in a gallery setting of the work, like, hey, this thing reminded me of your work. And that's where it's most rewarding for me as an artist, when somebody's thinking about the work when they're not directly in front of it. So
absolutely, it stays in your mind.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's very humbling and I'm proud of that.
Oh, good. Another reference I was thinking of as well was Bo Bartlett. Were you able to see that exhibition?
I was not able to see his work, and I'm excited to check out the Florida Prize because I know Matthew Cornell, one of my favorite artists, is going to be showing a lot of his stuff, and it's just amazing the way that artists are able to capture a mood and light. And one day I hope to be at that point with mastering the craft even more, refining it even more.
So I'm curious, what has changed in your practice since 2020 happened, since the big upheaval with the pandemic? And you've been in this amazing studio space for 2 years now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that nothing has really changed for the worse. If anything, the pandemic and quarantine has really reinforced my themes in the work. There's this term, kenopesia. Essentially, it's where bustling, noisy, active places are now left vacant and still and quiet. And I think that essentially the world has shut down and has become silent. And I think that it really, again, reinforces the themes I'm trying to say within my work, like isolation, privacy, solitude. So it has been difficult working in a bubble. And being in a studio, you don't really get much feedback as it is, but not having any sort of interaction with people in the gallery, it's been tough. But I think the online platforms have really kind of saved us the last couple of years.
That's good. I think sometimes it's so hard to really experience the work and to get the gravitas that you would get from your pieces online. Like, you just really get to be in front of them to see the minute details that you're really, it's, super, would you call it, it's realism?
Yeah, I would describe my work as hyper-realistic. And again, I want to have a facade of believability within the work. Back when I was at UCF, I would paint very large canvases like this size, which is 60 by 96. It was an acrylic paint, so I was able to work pretty quickly, but it got to the point where that bogged me down so much that I wasn't able to work out all of these ideas that I had. And that's when I shifted to this smaller work where I'm able to pump things out, work things out, and work on multiples at the same time, where one specific painting wasn't precious and I was giving myself permission to make mistakes. So that's where I get where like you say, like the hyper reality. Like, I'm just trying to work out like techniques with oil paint, how I can layer the paint, and like really just play with the materials while I have the opportunity to on these small paintings.
That's a great way to experience that and to go from the large scale to the small scale. And to me, small scale gets so intimate as well. And it's almost like looking through small windows, like the small windows that you have in a lot of these compositions.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I consider when I'm creating my compositions. Not only the content in itself, but the scale. With a larger piece, you have to get back from it and observe from afar. With these, they're very intimate, like you said. You kind of have to go in and dissect all of the little details, and that's what I really appreciate about when people view my work. Is like, oh, I didn't notice this little thing over here, because I like to like hide little things. I think it's fun. So yeah, they are very intimate spaces, and I do think about the way that the audience is interacting with the imagery.
What do you want the audience to take away from?
So like I said, I want them to experience like psychological experiences. Like, hey, I had this little tripe when I was a kid, but it's in a different context, or this kind of looks similar to my neighborhood, but then the connotation behind it, the way that the light, the color, and the form are handled. I want the feelings of tension or conflict and kind of unease. And I want to bring home the idea of the unknown or the unsettling within domestic spaces. Kind of like transforming the typical American house, like the white picket fence and whatever. And really just giving you what David Lynch does is the subversion of the Americana suburbia. A different way to look at suburban homes.
Right, it's not always in the sunshine and the brightness. There are lots of things happening. So with your practice, is there a way or a route that you're considering going farther?
So it's tricky, specifically using the iconography as like characters, because that becomes almost, I hate to say, gimmicky sometimes when you're just using the same sort of format. And I don't want to go directly into that avenue all the time. And that's why I like to explore a different way of how the viewer will approach the painting. So as far as experimentation, I've been really thinking, or allowing myself to select subject matter that I wouldn't originally. For example, I'm starting to use daytime photos for my references, and like just using that to look off of when I'm painting, and then just allowing myself to interpret this or the magic for it to happen on the picture plane, and just relying on my intuition to kind of guide me with what I've learned throughout the years.
That's awesome. You talk about artists and, gaining your craft and learning it. So now you're very familiar with it and can bring it about in these imagined spaces. I think the crops are all very interesting as well. And so those you're probably creating when you're placing things together, or of course when you're photographing as well. But I just think it's very effective, and it really brings out the different spaces in here.
Thank you. As far as the cropping goes, I want these to be seen as like maybe an opening to a scene. Again, I'm going to repeat myself, the audience viewing the setting, I want them to be a part of this narrative, so they're almost like forced into the space. I often do this with like confining spaces and restricting the viewer from accessing more information within it, but just giving like this, setting a stage for the drama to happen within the picture plane.
And it's very, very dramatic. I love the lights, the very, very soft atmosphere. It's just, and it reminds me a lot of, I spent some time in Illinois, in rural Illinois, and you're from Missouri?
Minnesota.
Minnesota. Minnesota. Sorry about that.
That's all good.
From Minnesota, and so that's a big part of your story as well.
I think that I'm more leaning towards like the Floridian subject matter, but I still like gravitate towards what Minnesota has to offer as far as like the Midwest and like the country, the countryside, because it is, it's isolated, and kind of the loneliness of the structures. I think that really is still prominent in my work.
And I think that's really interesting too, where you started with like what you would specifically think of as Americana, and now you're in Florida and you're able to depict different spaces and different places. There's different histories that built up this space, and those stories around those spaces, which for us can be very what am I thinking? They can hold a lot of meaning.
And in addition to that, I don't want to pigeonhole myself into one, like the mid-century suburban neighborhood. I like to do trailers, I like to do still lives or things off the street, or maybe just playgrounds, and it's fun exploring, and I feel like I'm just getting started.
Wonderful. Well, I very much enjoy them. And is there anything that you want to bring about or talk about, things that maybe people have had misconceptions about your work before?
I think that people just see these as small, melancholic, kind of, not necessarily drab, but like it's tough because they're small, intimate paintings and they get overlooked in group shows. What I really would appreciate is if people actually came and like dissected these, because there's a lot more information than meets the eye in it. And for me, like, there's a lot more than just, oh, it's just a house with a light in there. There's a lot more going on. So. And
the more information that you want them to know or to find out is within themselves.
Right, and the flip side of that, restricting the information as well, and like just kind of encompassing the idea of the unknown, and not like only giving a little bit of information, like giving them puzzle pieces so that they can dissect that, and asking more questions than giving answers.
It's a very fun tension and way to interact with your audience and to really have that connection. Would you tell me a little bit about some of the pieces that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so lately I've actually been like a chicken with its head cut off, preparing all these about this size paintings for my solo show coming up at the Lightner Museum up in St. Augustine. So that's been kind of like difficult, but I'm also in the process of scaling up. I have this pretty big reasonably sized panel that I was going to start, but then I had all these other paintings to do. And I intend to do like some small studies and then like transfer it on to the big paint. So I'm really excited to do that because I haven't done any big work for a couple years now. But at the same time that I was working on this one, which is relatively bigger than most of my smaller size ones, I was flipping between the gouache watercolor at the same time I was doing this, because oil paint, you need to wait for it to dry. But these are like small sessions, and it really reinvigorated my practice, doing very quick, like fun studies and then slowing down. So like that's been really fun for me with my practice right now, just switching gears, switching materials, and just really seeing where it goes. So
that's amazing. Using your additional time to work and think on smaller scales, to work fast, just to get that out there, get your drive and information out there. And of course the methods that you're using. Let's see. Is there anything else that you want to chat about?
No, I just want to thank you for having me. It's really exciting being a part of the lineage of the Mennello Museum studio visits.
Well, thank you. We're really glad to have you, and of course to see your work, to see it in person. I hope everybody is going to get a chance to do that at some point. Congratulations on the Lightner exhibit. That's great. Are they going to do any kind of writing for you?
They're going to do some writing for me. I think I'm going to do an artist talk. Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm anxious excited. So
Great.
It's going to be great.
Well, that's a great accomplishment and a great deal. So congratulations.
Thank you.